It is fitting that we end today's program with another round of exceptional conversation, a panel discussion on success in the sharing economy. I am pleased to introduce the moderator, the notable Dr. Dorian T. Warren. Dr. Warren is a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, an MSNBC contributor, and board chair of the Center for Community Change. He is also the host and executive producer of Nerding Out on MSNBC's digital platform, shift.msnbc.com, and we are happy he is joining us today. Please welcome Dr. Dorian Warren.
Good afternoon, everybody. We could do a little better than that. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Black Enterprise, for sponsoring this much-needed summit and for inviting me to join you today. Now, I know we're the only thing standing between you and the reception, so we're going to try and entertain you and get you in the mood. So as an introduction to this session, the sharing economy is the crowdsourcing of human labor and skills to fulfill a need. So think Uber or Airbnb and TaskRabbit. These are all part of the sharing economy, or what some people call the gig economy. These are the leaders of this new economy. Now, these services have created a new economic model and a new type of labor force. And I anticipate that our panel of experts will discuss the pros and the cons of the gig economy and the gig model, particularly for people of color and Black people. We're also going to discuss how, along with entrepreneurs, we can launch your own sharing economy, service-oriented businesses. So let's meet our panelists and get started. I'm happy to welcome the co-founder of Noirbnb. Please give it up for Stefan Grant. Noirbnb is a vacation and short-term rental company created for the African diaspora and other people of color. Stefan was inspired to start Noirbnb due to the discrimination he and others face while using Airbnb. Noirbnb is meant to be a safe and welcoming platform for everyone to travel, no matter their race or ethnicity. Please, please join me one more time in giving him a shout for being an entrepreneur who's visionary and responding to a situation of discrimination. Our next panelist, Jordan Medina, leads Uber's community outreach and engagement for Oakland and San Francisco. In this role, he is responsible for creating and executing Uber's strategic partnerships with nonprofits and small businesses in the Bay Area. Please welcome Jordan Medina. All right, Jordan, I'm going to start with you first, not because you went to a rival school of mine called Michigan, damn Wolverines, but because I want you to talk about Uber. Everyone knows Uber, right? We all know Uber. Uber is the emblem of the sharing economy. And so I want you to talk to us about what it means to be someone of importance at this very high-profile leader of a company in terms of the gig economy, the sharing economy. What does it mean? Why didn't you go work for, I don't know, Xerox? Does that even still exist? Or Disney, or some other, Walmart, Wells Fargo? Why Uber?
Yeah, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be a part of this panel. I've been at Uber for about 7 months now. First started off in recruiting, recently transitioned to this new role. And before that, I was actually in the nonprofit sector, so worked at a economic justice think tank, and then afterwards did a work with Teach for America, getting college students ready for jobs in the private sector and in Silicon Valley that mostly meant tech. And I think that experience is what actually led me to want to work in tech. A lot of my work, we were doing soft skills, mentorship with students, resumes, coding boot camps, et cetera, to try and increase the diversity of tech. And what I quickly realized is that there are a lot of amazing people in organizations doing that work, but very few people, at least in the world that I was in, had actually worked at the tech companies. And so when we were constantly approaching tech companies to figure out what would it take to get our students ready for you, what would it look like for our students to internship with you or to get jobs, we weren't we hadn't figured it out. We didn't know what that missing puzzle piece was. And so I saw joining Uber's team at first in recruiting, where I was for about 7 months, as a really great way to kind of get to know the underbelly of the beast, right? And to figure out what is the bar? How do tech companies assess talent? How do they keep talent? What does that look like? And then I transitioned to this role about a month ago. For those of you who don't know, Uber recently purchased a building about a year ago in downtown Oakland. We're going to expand our headquarters into Oakland. For those of you who aren't familiar with Oakland or the Bay Area, Oakland's a very diverse community. It's actually one of the most diverse cities in the country. Used to have a very strong, predominantly Black culture and presence. It was the birthplace of the Black Panther Party. A lot of historical events happened in the Black community, took place actually in Oakland. And when Uber moves in, we'll be one of the largest employers in that city, largest employers in that community, and we're one of the first tech companies to kind of move into the East Bay outside of Pandora and Ask, I think, are kind of the legacy tech companies that are there. And so in my new role, it's really figuring out what does tech look like in a majority Black community? What does tech look like in a majority brown community? What does it look like in a community that really is struggling, right? I mean, I live in Oakland. I've been there since I graduated from college. I think it's a great city, a great community, but it has very real issues and very real problems when it comes to poverty, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to access to transit. And so this job, I think, in this opportunity is a great way for me to kind of merge everything that I care about, which is Oakland, California, it's Black and brown communities, it's education, it's nonprofits, and it's Uber, which I think is, as you kind of mentioned, at the forefront, kind of seen as the pinnacle of the sharing economy. And what does that, and so I think it'll be great to be able to have a positive impact in the city of Oakland, but then also for Oakland and the community members and small business owners and nonprofit leaders that are there to be able to have a positive impact on our business and kind of see what does it look like for tech to operate in Oakland, and can it do it differently than it has in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco. And I'm really proud to be spearheading that effort to try to figure that out.
So, yes, give him. I'm glad Jordan mentioned something important. This month is the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party in Oakland. So it's not lost on me, right, that you said that. It's this month, 50 years ago. Okay, Stefan, I want to get you in the conversation. So who's ever rented a room on Airbnb? Okay, someone said today, huh? So Airbnb, as many of us know, maybe had some issues, and they've hired in some big guns, former Attorney General Eric Holder, to help them craft an anti-discrimination policy going forward. But before that happened, and I want to get Stefan to tell his story, he had an experience with Airbnb which provoked him to create his own company. So tell us that story. What happened?
So last year in Atlanta, first of all, thank you guys for the opportunity. Love Black Enterprise. I've literally been reading the magazine since going with my mom to the hairdresser back in the day. So to be here right now is an honor. But last year during the A3C Music Festival in Atlanta, we were renting an Airbnb, and while we were there, the neighbors saw a bunch of Black people in this really nice house, and they assumed we were robbing the place. So they called the police on us. 2 officers showed up. They had their guns drawn, and it was a pretty crazy situation. I thought we were robbing it, and I'm like, dude, I'm wearing sweatpants and slippers. I'm not robbing anything. So during the whole ordeal, once they kind of like figured out we weren't robbing the place, I said, you know what? Let's see how we can put a positive spin on this. And my stage name at the time was Steph is Dope, and the dope stands for driven on positive energy, because I like to take whatever perceived negative situation and turn it into a positive. So during the whole ordeal, I asked one of the cops, I was like, hey, is it cool if I Snapchat this? And he was like, yeah, as long as you get my good side. So I was like, bet. And I recorded the whole thing, and then they were about to leave, and I said, you know, let me get a selfie. And I took a selfie with the cops, and the selfie ended up going viral on Twitter. And I thought it was just a cool thing at first, but after a while, people were like, wow, like, thank God you guys are alive. And honestly, I didn't even think about it to that depth, but it was a real safety issue. And considering everything that's going on with unarmed Black people and police, like, it was a pretty serious thing. So during the whole ordeal, I realized just how big of a deal it was. And after a couple of days, I think the Shade Room or somebody posted the selfie. And in the comments, a lot of people were like, well, what is Airbnb? I've never heard of this. What is this company? And a lot of people were like, well, I've heard of it, but now that I see this, I would never use it. And that was actually bothersome to me because, one, I think the business model that Airbnb created was incredible, but also, two, one of the things that I'm big on is just black people traveling and gaining new experiences and seeing the world and doing a lot of cool things. So I said, you know what? Let's take this negative and turn it into a positive. So I was trying to think for a while of what I could do next, and the tweet was blowing up everywhere. My brother was like, yo, you should drop a mixtape. And I was like, that probably wouldn't be the best idea. So I reached out to Airbnb, and I was like, look, guys, I got a great idea. I think we can make something happen. And I kind of gave them a brief pitch, and they liked it. And I was trying to think about what name would be cool, and it was like, you know what, Noirbnb. It just makes sense. It looks cool. It sounds good. So I ran with that, and we came up with a business plan. Airbnb flew us out here last year in November, went to their headquarters, and we gave them the entire pitch. And I don't think they saw the value, but we told them, we're like, look, the African American spending power is right now $1.3 trillion, projected to be $1.7 trillion. If we were a nation, which we are, but if we were our own nation, we'd be in the top 10 richest countries in the world. So like, I was like, you know what, like there's value here on top of that. Just as far as black travel, like the African American travel market is a $50 billion industry. So we have an immense spending power. So I said, you know what, you guys haven't really focused energy on that market, and they didn't really see the value because, to be honest, a lot of their market was not black people. And at the time, I believe their black employee base was about 1%. So they liked the idea, but they weren't trying to necessarily focus on the market, or I guess segregate or split. So they didn't end up running with the idea. So our initial goal was to actually be integrated within their company, but they just didn't want to make it happen. So a couple months later, Harvard came out with a study and said that there's rampant discrimination on the app. Black hosts actually make about 16% less than white hosts, and black guests oftentimes are not even being able to book on the site. So we said, hey guys, like, I mean, we told you had a problem. Now Harvard's saying you got a problem. Like, what's good? You know what I mean? And they slept again. And then a couple months later, one of our friends actually was trying to book an Airbnb for a conference, for the Black Tech Week conference in Miami, and Airbnb actually booked him the place. And when he showed up, the guest saw this tall black guy and was like, nope, and basically turned him away. So like we called him. We're like, hey guys, like this is a real issue. Like maybe we can actually solve this. And they were like, yeah, well, we're gonna make a statement. And we're like, okay, cool. And then a couple months later, the Airbnb While Black hashtag took off. When we called them, we're like, you can't deny it now. Like, what's good? Like, what's going on? And they were like, well, yeah, we're gonna hire somebody to make a statement. And we were like, still trying to see how we get it integrated. And I told my partner, I said, you know what? They're never gonna solve this. It's pretty much up to us to do this, because if we don't, nobody will. So, thank you. So that pretty much led to the beginning of Noirbnb. And to be completely honest, we just decided to do it. I bought the LLC. We didn't even have a website or a platform, but I got on Twitter. I was like, look, y'all, Noirbnb, rock with us. And it was Friday, June 3rd, and our goal was, okay, if we have 100 email signups by Monday, then we know we have a viable business model and we can run with it. And by the time Monday came around, we were at like 7,000. So we knew, like, okay, there's something here. Yeah. Thank you.
So as I was reading my Black Enterprise earlier this spring, I saw this article on the sharing economy, and the numbers jumped out at me. So according to a report, Uber, Airbnb, and TaskRabbit in 2015 made $6.4 billion. They're projected to make $20.4 billion by 2020. So astronomical increase. So Jordan, I want to come back to you, and I want you to answer this too, Stefan. What are the opportunities for black people to get some of those billions, right? Now, I know it's easier said than done in terms of just starting your own company, but what are the opportunities at an established institution or company like Uber? And then what are the startup opportunities, even though you had to start up your company out of an experience based on these new tech companies of discrimination? What are the opportunities for black folks? But then what are some of the challenges that we should be alert to in this new economy, this new gig sharing economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, number one, Uber, worldwide, we have over 1 million driver partners, and driver partners are the people who pick you up and take you where you want to go across our UberX, Uberpool, Uber Eats platforms. I think over 60% of them are people of color. And so the large majority of our driver partners are people of color, whether they're in the United States, whether they're in India, whether they're in Japan, South America, et cetera. And driver partners, every time you hop into an Uber, I took an Uber to get here today. Hopefully some of you did too.
Do you get a discount?
I do get a discount. I do. Not enough, but driver partners keep roughly about 70 to 65% of that money that you pay. And so right away, that's a huge economic impact that goes into Black and brown communities across the world. I think that's one of the reasons that we've been so successful. Most of our driver partners work on average around 10 hours a week. They're really able to pick their own hours, figure out what works for them. Most of them use it as a side hustle, so maybe they have a regular 9 to 5, but they want to put a little bit of extra money away to save for college for their kids. Maybe they're saving for a trip with their family, and our platform allows them that flexibility to really be their own boss and to be their own entrepreneur. I think it's really amazing. In some cities, we've kind of seen driver partners kind of start their own business underneath our platform, where maybe they have 5 or 6 cars and they have 5 or 6 friends who are all driving, and then the one guy is kind of the head boss and kind of gets them all together, and they can start their own ride-sharing business under the Uber umbrella, and kind of divvy out cash that way. I think that's been a really exciting thing to witness in our growth and our trajectory. And then more specifically in my job, as we're building our headquarters in Oakland, one thing I'm particularly focused and interested in is how can it takes a lot of effort to maintain a building, right? Especially a building that's gonna house 2,300 employees. It's about 400,000 square feet. And so one thing I'm looking at with our workplace team is all the things that go into maintaining a building. So think about food services, think about the construction of the building, think about the electrical, think about toilet paper, soap, coffee, all of these things. We're really trying to figure out how can we diversify our supply chain there. And what does that look like for us to make sure that some of the contracts and services that we're awarding go into the community that's already there? So what does it look like to award a contract to a Black-owned business? What does it look like to award a contract to a woman-owned business? How can we make sure that we're doing more of that internally, so that way you talk about the wealth that the ride-sharing economy is generating? How can we make sure that we're funneling that wealth back into communities of color? I think some of the challenges, and one thing that's great, one thing that I'll probably let you speak on since you've actually gone out and done it, but I think what's great about the sharing economy in general is that it really operates on an assets-light model. And so you don't have to have a bunch of investment or capital up front to get this thing up and running. For Uber, you need a critical mass of people who may be interested in riding, and you need a critical mass of people who may be interested in driving. But as the company that provides the platform, we're not providing the cars, right, for people to go and drive at. Noirbnb and Airbnb, they're not providing the houses. It's really these people who need extra cash, who have these goods, right, that are lying dormant. Vehicles lie dormant 90% of the time, and they're the second biggest expense in a family's house outside of the rent or mortgage that they pay. And so companies like Uber, we're really doing a great job at getting people to use their cars more frequently and more often while getting paid to do it.
Mm-hmm. And in my view, the sky is really the limit for what Black people can accomplish within the sharing economy, because in my eyes, we said it's the 50th anniversary of the Black Panthers, but how many of you are familiar with the Black Panther comic from Marvel? We got any comic heads in here? In my view, I think we can potentially build literally our own economy, and like I said, $1.3 trillion, there's literally nothing stopping us. But the most important thing I feel like is to pool our resources and our money together. We have homes, we have cars, we have a variety of services that we can provide. It's you know what? There's nothing stopping us from actually getting together and sharing those resources to actually have that money circulate within our community so that we actually benefit ourselves. Because the panel a couple hours ago was about diversity and inclusion within the tech space, and I feel like an important thing is, you know what? Diversity and inclusion is most definitely needed, but at the same time, if they won't let you in, you got to make something of your own, and that's Absolutely. Just what it is. You know what I mean? So I feel like, you know what, and it's actually, the beautiful thing with our culture is there are so many different issues and challenges, but that provides so much opportunity to come up with our own solutions and offer. You'll never solve discrimination. There's no algorithm or there's no code that's going to solve racism. But what we can do is offer solutions and implement them and make the best way for ourselves possible. And I feel like that's the way we can move forward. And there's an infinite potential for that to happen.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that, I mean, the sharing economy isn't new, right? Like,
Right.
it's been around for forever, especially in black and brown communities, and it was just a necessity and a way of life and a way to survive. What's new is that there's money behind it, right? And that it's this new hot thing, hot new market. There's a bunch of VC money that can go behind into it. And so I think it's imperative and really important that black and brown people have a seat at the table. And like you said, if we don't have a seat at the table, right, we need to create our own table and make sure that we're bringing our own voices, our own experiences, and our own companies to that.
For sure.
Well, on this point, actually, Steph, I want you to respond to something Jordan just said. How are you attracting money?
How are we attracting money? Really, people have been loving the idea and loving just the concept of it, and they see the value in it. So the most important thing is just making sure that we actually launch the platform and make sure that it's the best platform possible. Because at the end of the day, you can have people love our story, they love our concept, they love our marketing, but if the product isn't viable, then there's really no point to it. So the main thing is just making sure that the product is as viable and as awesome and provides the best service possible. But people have been reaching out to us to invest. We just want to make sure that we actually launch, because as Michael Seibel said before, he's like, look, it doesn't really matter. Your idea doesn't matter until it's actually fully functioning and gaining revenue. And that's the main thing, to make sure that we can start gaining revenue. So for sure.
Okay, Jordan, I got to ask you a really tough question.
I knew
ready?
it was coming.
All right, so I live in New York. I'm from Chicago. When I was growing up in Chicago, we didn't really take cabs. When I did, I never had a black cab driver. In New York, yellow taxis, right? Same problem everybody else has, keep passing by. But Uber comes along, and I was an early adopter, I have to say, because I was like, you know what? If the yellow taxis aren't gonna pick me up, this is guaranteed, right? And then I met these black Uber drivers. I was like, wow, this is great. When I go home to Chicago, black Uber drivers. Would have never imagined black people driving cars. And then I read this article, I mean, you know, for pay, right? So I'm reading this article a couple weeks ago, and I learned that Uber has launched a driverless car in Pittsburgh, right? Which is incredible, and I'm obsessed with robots. I'm obsessed with this, right? In technology, here we are in Silicon Valley. And aside from the question of whether the robots are gonna be black or white, or get paid the same, I wanna know, Jordan, when Uber has driverless cars, what are gonna happen to the black drivers?
That's a really good question. And first, I want to mention, I'm glad you brought up New York, because actually, while I don't live in New York, I think I have our market in New York is really unique. And so you talked about how it's cabbing while black, right? Like Airbnb while black, cabbing while black too. And it's been really hard, I think, for black people to hail a cab in any major metropolitan city. They just kind of like drive right past you. I think Uber's kind of helped with that, because you call it from your phone. The person, I mean, you can have a profile photo, you don't have to have a profile photo, and then the driver doesn't know where they're taking you until you get into the car and they accept the trip. And at that point, they can't kick you out. So it doesn't matter if you're going to the hood, it doesn't matter if you're going, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter where you're going, like the Uber driver has to take you there. And what's been really fascinating in New York is that about 40% of our trips happen in the outer boroughs. And so they're happening in places like the Bronx, they're happening in places like Brooklyn, even the non-gentrified places of Brooklyn, right? They're
I gotta
happening
say,
in
whenever a
Queens.
yellow cab passes me by, I shout, that's why I'm calling Uber, just so they know and understand there's competition, right?
Yeah.
There's a one way in which competition can work to end discrimination. If they know there's competition for a market, maybe they'll change their racist practices, maybe.
Absolutely, maybe. And then in comparison, about only 6% of taxis in New York have trips that take place outside of Manhattan. And so it's been really great to kind of look at transportation equity and what does that look like in a major metropolitan city with our app. To answer your question, we did launch about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we launched driverless or self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars in Pittsburgh, with the plan to kind of slowly branch out and make it more readily available in other markets across the world. And I think it's interesting on two fronts. The first part is self-driving vehicles, we believe, have the potential to make driving a lot safer. Millions of people die across the world every year related to automobile accidents, and over 90% of them are at the result of human error. And so so self-driving cars has the potential to make our roads safer, has the ability to make transportation more efficient. I think when you look at cities, right? And cities across the country are facing this. People are moving in, right? Cities are becoming more dense, cities are becoming more expensive, but also 30% of spaces in cities are usually dedicated to parking. And so what does it look like in a future where you don't need those parking lots in the downtown cores of cities anymore? What does it mean in cities when you don't need parking spots on the side of curbs anymore? I think it frees up and allows entrepreneurs and city planners to kind of be more innovative and more creative with how they approach cities. All of a sudden you can build more housing. All of a sudden you can build more parks because cars aren't the main way. So people aren't going to be driving themselves and parking their cars. I think in the future you'll be able to summon a car on an app. It'll be a self-driving car. It'll drop you off and then go to the outskirts, you know, and wait for someone else to pick it up. What that means for drivers, I think we see a future where at least in our company, that it'll be a mix, right? And the technology is still in its very early stages. Tomorrow we're not gonna release self-driving cars across the world. It's gonna be gradual, it's gonna take time. And even when it is fully implemented, we still kind of see it as a mix. What's interesting about Pittsburgh is that there are we call it Pittsburgh like the Black Diamond because it's very tough. Like, how many of you have ever been to Pittsburgh before? So I'm from Michigan, so think about the weather, right? It snows. Think about all the bridges that are there. At this moment, like our technology isn't able to sometimes tell whether or not it's to drive over a bridge, right? If there's snow on the ground, the computer and algorithms can't necessarily tell where the streets are. If you go from the winter to the summer, the information that the computers and that the scanners are picking up look radically different. And so even over time, we still envision a future where it's a mix, where we'll still need human drivers to assist self-driving vehicles in those tough terrains, in those tough to navigate cities. And then additionally, with self-driving cars on the road more, and getting more use out of the car, we actually see there'll be a growing demand for more maintenance needed on that car, which opens up more job opportunities for people to maintain the car. And it's not going to be regular mechanics in the past, right? These cars are going to be computers, essentially, right? And so we're going to need people with programming skills, with coding skills, with mechanical skills to understand the intricacies of these cars and how do you fix these cars and how do you fix them more regularly so they can stay on the road or on the road for longer periods of time. And so we see that as an opportunity to engage our driver partners going forward and as an opportunity to create more jobs to maintain the self-driving vehicles in the future.
Cars and robots will break down, no doubt. Right. All right, I'm right behind you, Jordan. After you take about 100 trips in the robot cars, then I will venture to do one.
Sounds good.
Test it out. All right. So challenging question for you.
Yes, sir.
So I want to understand the model a bit better of Noirbnb. And so the thing in my head is the enormous wealth gaps between blacks and whites, right? We tend to have slightly lower rates of home ownership. So it feels to me like there could be a disadvantage if you're black and you want to participate in this economic platform, in this model, to rent out and get a little extra money. But if I don't own my own home, or if I'm not even really renting, right? I might be staying with my cousin or my mother. How do I have access in the same? What's so funny about that? How do I have access in the same way to take advantage of this growing platform of the sharing economy, like a Noirbnb or an Airbnb?
Well, one of the big things is that like you said, like there's a lot of there isn't that much home ownership in the black community compared to the white community. But using Noirbnb or using Airbnb in itself is an income stream. So it actually helps to alleviate a lot of bills or extra payments. And on top of that, it can help people keep their homes. And not only that, I mean, in a lot of ways, maybe purchase another home or purchase an apartment or something like that. And I feel like, I mean, there's tons of, although it may come across as there aren't that many homeowners, there's tons of people who own homes, and especially in communities like out here in Atlanta, in DC. She's a huge market in Maryland, Prince George's County, and I feel like that's a way to not only inspire people to start purchasing homes, but also like connect the black community and help us. One of our goals is to connect the diaspora, not only just across the world, but within the country. And I feel like it's a big thing. Like, you know what? Not only come into our homes, but one of our founders, one of her big things was when she was using Airbnb, she stayed with a Jamaican grandmother, and this grandmother, all of her children had gone, they weren't in the home anymore. But when she stayed with her, the grandmother gave her some Jamaican soup. I'm Jamaican, so I know the power of some good Jamaican food. So I feel like that in itself is not only just bringing you into your home in a physical way, but also bringing you and making you a part of their family in a lot of ways.
So
And
the
I feel
menu is better. What you say at number one?
you could say that, most definitely. I mean, you can't beat some good curry chicken and rice and peas. But I feel like that's an important thing. And the most important thing, too, is it's not even, our market isn't just America. We're thinking about, of course, the African-American culture, but Africa, the entire continent, from the north to the south. And I mean, like, that's a huge thing. And like, that's a lot of things that people haven't even been really focused on or paying attention to. But home ownership is also a big thing out there as well. So not only just traveling around the country, but you know what? Go to Africa, go to Ghana, go to Nigeria, go to South Africa, go to Jamaica, go to Trinidad, and be a part of that community. So I feel like in a lot of ways we're helping to solve that issue, for sure.
Wow, that's a vision.
For sure.
Okay, we want to get to questions from you, so get your questions ready. I think there are microphones that are possibly circulating. I'm going to ask one more question while you guys get ready. Ooh, I see a lot of hands. Take us almost 10 years from now, so 2025. These are already disruptive technologies. They have radically changed how we live and operate in the world in the last 5-10 years. Take us 10 years down the road. Where will Uber be? Where will Noirbnb be? Will there be some other disruptive technologies that will come along and transform radically how the sharing economy operates today? So what's your vision in 2025, particularly for Black people in these technologies and platforms?
Well, for me, I hope Uber's public by 2025, so I reap some of the benefits of it. But I think in 2025, the Oakland office will be open by then. We're slated to open in 2018. And I have a really strong investment, not only because it's my job, but also because it's a community that I care deeply about, making sure that that office is representative of Oakland, that the communities that benefit from it are longtime or native Oaklanders. And then I hope that doing that in Oakland reverberates throughout the company and the culture. So one thing I hope and what I see for Uber in the future is we're still relatively young. I think people use us every day and we've kind of become a verb. I think they say that in tech, when you become a verb, that's how you know that like you've made it, like that, let's Google that, oh, let's Facebook, oh, let's Uber. But we're still a relatively young company.
Right.
And so what I think we've already kind of disrupted your traditional ride hailing market when it comes to the old model of like taxis, and now we're now with our UberX platform. I think our Uber Pool, which for those of you who aren't familiar, is kind of pairs you with another passenger going in the same direction. Right now it accounts for about 20% of our business worldwide. In the Bay Area, it's about 50%. We really see that as the future of our business. We think that you're cutting carbon emissions by getting more people into fewer cars. You're being able to initiate conversation and maybe community. It's really cool. I've had like really amazing experiences in an Uber Pool, just talking to different people from different backgrounds of life, not only the driver partner, but also like someone who's headed in the same direction. I'm excited to see what that looks like in the future. And then we've also kind of recently branched out into the food delivery platform. So Uber Eats, if you haven't used it, I strongly recommend it. It's what I do when I'm lazy and don't feel like leaving my apartment. But I think that, so we're just at the beginning stages of what our company looks like in the future, or what our company will look like down the road. I think self-driving cars and vehicles obviously present another realm of possibilities for us. And one thing I love about our company is that our CEO is very adamant on us always kind of maintaining this startup culture and always maintaining this startup mentality, which means that there's room for error and there's room to make mistakes and there's room to grow and to learn. And I see that as and we're also a culture that promotes and really prides ourselves on the best idea wins. And like whoever has the best idea is allowed to kind of execute that idea to the fullest of their abilities. And I think that that's a really exciting culture to be in at a company like Uber, and I think it presents a lot of opportunity for historically underrepresented groups, right? We're talking about women, we're talking about Black people, we're talking about Latinos in tech to really to be able to work at a place like Uber and to come up with an idea and to know that you're supported in that culture and in that environment to drive that forward, I think is a really exciting place to be in, and I'm excited to see what our product managers and what our engineers and what our business partners come up with for our future. And I'm excited to be along for the ride.
Great.
For sure. My vision for our company 10, 15 years from now is definitely to be public, of course. That'd be love, be a multi-billion-dollar institution, but also, like I said, connect the diaspora across the world. And I mean, one of my big, I don't want to say idols, but inspirations is Marcus Garvey. And I feel like it's important to, yeah, make some noise for that. Make some noise for Marcus Garvey for sure. I feel like it's important to help us realize our strength and the power that we genuinely have, because in a lot of ways we tend to doubt ourselves and doubt our potential. But being a musician, I understand, like, we help push and motivate culture in so many different ways, and we often, not even often, I mean often is an understatement, we create so many awesome things that push the culture forward, but we're often not the ones who reap the benefits of that. And I feel like it's important for us to not only create the ideas, but also reap the benefits. And Tristan Walker mentioned it before, like, we're often the consumers and not so often the producers. And I feel like it's time to finish that loop in the sense of we actually benefit from what we create. So I feel like, man, just connecting Black people, Black travelers, helping us see the world. A lot of the comparisons we get are to the Green Book, where Black travelers back in the day could find safe havens and safe places to go to. And I feel like that's what we need to do, just create not even safe havens, but create the platform in a space where we can actually be ourselves, link up with each other, and build money within the community. And not even just through home sharing, where we can make money that way, but also, man, connect Black businesses. Like, say you're traveling to San Francisco, like, man, you can use our app, and if you need to get a fresh lineup or get your locks retwisted or get your hair done,
yes.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, you can do that within our app, you know what I mean? And like, that's just the service of what we're trying to build and the ideas that we have. So I feel like, man, really just building the Black economy and showing the power that we have and just taking us to the next level as a people. And that could sound grandiose, but man, in a lot of ways, a big issue is gentrification. I feel like, one, our app can not only help Black people keep their homes and keep their neighborhoods, but you know what? Expand our neighborhoods and expand our communities, because it's a major key. So I feel like I mean, we have so many goals and ideas, but that's just a few that have come to mind. So, yeah, definitely.
It's just a few.
Yeah,
all right,
for sure.
Let's get to you. Let's take some questions. And I see the microphone. And between this panel and the last, it's a little male heavy. So let's get some sisters' voices here. No offense, brothers in the audience, but I want to hear from some of the sisters who might have questions or comments. I see somebody right there.
Hello, I'm Jessica from the Jaw Research Institute, and I actually had a question that was kind of framed from the last panel, but I'll ask you here since I'm here. I started a media company which basically shows you, my tagline is, I show you how to show up, and you're so true, you're right on target. In digital marketing, we've influenced a lot. We've influenced a lot of culture, but we don't get paid. A lot of the people I come in contact with, like I said, this was for the other panel, but can't remember the guy's name, the one that does the other one. Anyway.
Everett Taylor?
The two guys that were up here, the guy
Everett
that was
Taylor
sitting
and Christian
here.
Walker. Yeah.
Christian Walker. Okay, he was saying something about Black Enterprise, or to Black Enterprises calling him, and he was like, I don't appreciate, or I don't need this, I don't deserve it. I come in contact with so many entrepreneurs and people of color that are like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to move forward. And I usually have to do a whole mindset change. But anyway, I want to pose a question to you all, because I advocate for mothers who are suffering from depression, stress, and anxiety. 200 African-American babies die every year, maybe even more, because they aren't really talked about that much, due to perinatal causes. So in their mother's stomach, they're suffering from so much stress from their mother stressing out. We've talked a lot about helping our children, but how do we then help the mothers and help the family? Because all of that work will be undone because you've sent this child back into that same mindset that they came from. And if the mindset of the mother and the family isn't right, all the work you're doing with these kids isn't going to go anywhere. So I say all of that to say, I guess my question to you all is, how are you using digital media? You know, you touched on that, but how are you using digital media to not only touch the hearts of the children that are there, but the parents as well, and kind of encompass that family?
I can go first. I think, well, even within our company, the beauty of our company is that we have a lot of Black women within our company, but mothers as well. And I got to give a huge shout out to them, because I mean, one, being a mother and raising children and taking care of a household while also working on a tech startup is an overwhelming job, to say the least. But I think what you said was an important key, in the sense of, man, a lot of people don't even realize, one, on the first point, Black people, we have to stop doubting ourselves because we are powerful beyond measure. So that's the very first thing, period, point blank. Like, and I feel like what's happening right now is, I mean, in this room, for all of us to be here right now in San Francisco, in like the heart of it all, like there's a new renaissance happening. Like there's an entire, not even just there's a Silicon Valley renaissance happening in a lot of ways. And I feel like what we have to do is create platforms for ourselves. But in regards to mothers, men, Black mothers, Black women are the key to the success and the advancement of the Black race, period, point blank. Like, I mean, and that's not to take anything away from the fathers, because I mean, we need both of us. When the Black man and the Black woman can work together, we will be fully and without a doubt unstoppable, period, point blank. Facts. But I feel like it's important. One, we have to make sure that the mental health and the physical health and the spiritual health of our women is important, because the next generations come from our women, and if our women aren't good, then our kids won't be good, and as a community, we won't be good. And I feel like it's important to focus on that, genuinely care about that, because like I said, man, the women are everything. So, I mean, I think the way we go about that is, within our own company, we empower women all day, because I mean, we don't want to have any kind of disparity or inequality, because I mean, man, like, we're all in the even. That's how we treat it. And our CPO, our creative director, Honey, she's a mother, an incredible person, an awesome team member. Without her, we wouldn't have anything. So I feel like just making sure that we put the women in our company to the forefront and show that we value them and they're important to us, and just making sure that we genuinely cater to that market. And also, I mean, just within using the app, like, if you can rent out a room in your house, that's extra money that can go to sending your child to school or putting some food in the fridge. So I mean, there's levels. I could talk about this all day, but there's levels to it for sure. For sure.
For sure. Two things I'll say that make me really proud to work at Uber, specifically as it relates to the Black community, is number one, we all live in America, so the constant like media attention and focus on and the rise of Black Lives Matter in response to all of the police shootings of Black and brown men and women across the country. I think about 2 months back, 3 months, Uber we programmed a moment of silence at midnight for where you weren't able to call an app. You weren't able to call a Uber at midnight a few months back, and all the cars changed to peace signs, and then it was a blackout, so we called it a blackout. And then the message popped up. It was saying that like we're taking this moment of silence where we're shutting down our system to stand on behalf of all the racial protests and like violence that it's happening across the United States. And that was actually spearheaded by Black women at our company, in our Black Employee Resource Group. They really pressed our leadership. I think Google was taking stands, Facebook was taking a stance on it, and and Black women on our Uber Q is what our Black Employee Resource Group is called. They were like, what is our public stance, and how are we going to stand with this, knowing that 60% of our driver partners are black or brown people, knowing that our customers, and we've kind of provided transportation to areas and neighborhoods that have traditionally had a hard time getting transportation, like we need to take a stance. And so that was one way, I think, where our company made a very public stance in support of Black lives, in support of criminal justice reform. And then actually another one that we've really been involved in, and our CEO recently published an op-ed in the San Francisco Chronicle talking about the need for criminal justice reform, and a reform of mandatory minimum sentences, a reform of whether something counts as a felony or a misdemeanor. And we've really seen that impact our business model when it comes to driver partners. And so we've gotten, I think, a lot of flack from certain groups regarding our background checks, and the way that we handle them, and we do it the way that we do it, where we don't use the federal databases, because sometimes you have people who are in the system, and maybe they never even went to jail, or maybe the case was thrown out, or maybe it was a misdemeanor. But in the federal system, if you use some of the technicalities and protocols that are in the federal background check system, sometimes these people come up and they're not eligible for jobs because of those backgrounds. And I think we're talking about wealth generation in Black and brown communities and how do we generate wealth and keep our wealth. I think we have to talk about the prison industrial complex and how that's had such a negative impact in our community and made it really hard for our mothers and our fathers to provide for their families. And so one thing we've constantly been in conversations around is the need for criminal justice reform and what does that look like for companies like Uber to take a public stance. And the op-ed, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. What's so great about that story is that it's told through the eyes of one of our driver partners. It talks about how he's maintained a rating comparable to that of to the other driver partners who don't have a background. I think his maybe was like a misdemeanor for possession of marijuana. I'm not exactly sure, but what's great is that the story talks about how we've provided him a real economic opportunity to provide for himself and his family. Even though at the time it wasn't a popular thing to do for us. And so it's exciting, I think, for us to continue to evolve in our thinking in ways that we can support communities and communities that have historically been locked out of opportunities to generate wealth.
Great. Okay, so the clock is ticking, and I saw there's someone here, and then we're going to come here. So if we can hear from both of you really quickly, your questions, and then we'll let the two panelists respond. So over here first, and then here.
All right, I'm going to make it quick. My name is Kumi Raouf from the I Love Being Black movement. We're huge proponents in travel and getting Black people to travel on the road, so thank you both for what you do. Stefan, this question is specifically for you. There was a point at which you said, I'm either going to do it within the system or I'm going to do it outside of the system. So in other words, I'm going to integrate into the system or I'm going to innovate outside of the system. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us all in this room at what point you decided to make that pivot?
Man.
Wait 1 second. Let's grab this one here, and then we'll get you to respond to both. Yep.
Question for Steph also, my brother with the locks. My name is Eldridge, co-founder of Spendify. We're a digital platform that makes it easy to discover amazing Black businesses in your city. Appreciate what you're doing. My question is, I see on your site that you are now seeking community investments. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know, how's that going? Why did you choose that route? And is it working for you? Would you suggest that other startups try it?
All right, cool. Respond to his question first. To keep it 1,000 with you, my brother, the initial situation happened, actually today is the 10th? Today's the 10th of October. The situation with Airbnb, the selfie, that actually happened a year ago yesterday. So I kind of saw the value a little bit after that, but we wanted to pitch it to Airbnb. We actually met with them in November of last year. And after we walked out of that meeting and they said they didn't want to run with it, I said, you know what? Let's do it. Like, I was ready to launch it right then, but my partner was like, wait a minute. The funny thing is, they actually, Airbnb offered, they wanted to make us ambassadors of the company. And see, you already laughing, right? Because, and at first I was like, this is cool.
Does that come with a check?
Huh?
Does that come with a check?
I mean, look, I wasn't gonna rock if it didn't come with a check, right? So, but my whole thing was, like, is this a genuine thing, or are we just the cool token Blacks with natural hair? I'm not trying to be somebody's show puppet, you know what I mean? So I was like, you know what? The ambassador thing is cool, but if we're not gonna actually be able to create a platform to service our community, what's the point? So I was ready to launch then, and I bought the domain for Noirbnb in January, right, of 2015. And we waited a couple of months. Harvard came out with a study, and we were going to launch then, and my partner was like, wait a minute, hold on, we should be ambassadors, like, we could probably still get in. And like I said, we just kept calling them, and then by the time Airbnb While Black took off, we called them again, and by that time they had hired a head of diversity, and we were waiting on a call from him, and I said, look, yo, sorry to talk so candidly, but I was like, look, man, like, they're not taking it seriously, and if we don't do it, nobody will. So I was ready to launch in January, and we didn't make our announcement until June. So that's 5-6 months. But like, I'm glad that it kind of took that time, because throughout that time, we were able to not only do market research, but like see the value of what we were trying to propose, and it gave us time to kind of formulate our ideas. So I mean, but I was ready to launch months ago. It just so happened that we launched in June, but I was ready at the very beginning, to be completely honest. And
30 seconds
yeah.
for this question.
And in regards to community investment, man, that's super important to us, because not even just besides offering solutions to this discrimination issue, I feel like building wealth in the community is important, but not only that, being able to directly invest in something from your community, I mean, it's FUBU, man. For us, by us, you can't beat it. And I feel like it's important for us to to have not only the power to invest, but know that they're helping people in our community are helping to build something within that, and that's just something that really, really mattered to us. I mean, like of course we want to get venture capitalists and angel investors, but if the community isn't a part of it, then it doesn't really matter to us. And my co-founder G-Day would hate me saying this, but and internally we look at ourselves as the people startup, and that's why we wanted to give the community an opportunity to invest in us. So hopefully that answered your question.
So I don't think those of you in the back can see it, but these two cats have an amazing shoe game. First of all, I don't know if they coordinated that, but the kicks. Let's give brothers Grant and Medina a round of applause for their brilliance, their visionary. Really appreciate you guys, and keep up the great work. We expect big things from you, and thanks for sticking with us before the reception.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.